Hello and welcome. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on something that feels like modern-day magic, building software. So let's just dive right in with the biggest question of all. I mean, seriously, how does it happen? It seems incredible, doesn't it? You have this spark of an idea, and then, sometime later, millions of people are tapping on an icon that started right inside your head. What on earth happens in between? Well, that's exactly what we're going to unpack today, step by step. So first things first, you gotta have a blueprint. And let me tell you, this is the phase where so many projects either set themselves up for success or fail before they even begin. It's all about the huge decisions you have to lock in before a single person writes a single line of code. Now, these three things, your tech, your architecture, and your team, are completely intertwined. And the order really matters. The technology you pick basically determines the kind of system architecture you can build, and that architecture dictates the kind of team you need to hire to actually build it. If you mess this up, say you pick a tech stack and it can't scale, fixing that mistake later on isn't just expensive, it's sometimes flat out impossible. And this quote, this just perfectly captures a classic trap. It is so easy to get distracted by the fun, small stuff, right? Like arguing over the perfect shade of blue for a button. But getting lost in those tiny details while the massive foundational decisions are still floating around, that is an absolute recipe for disaster. Okay, so the blueprint is set. Now the project enters its longest and, honestly, its most grueling stage, the middle phase. We call it the long slog for a reason. The initial buzz has faded, the deadline feels a million miles away, and this is where the real dangers, like complacency, scope creep, and just plain nasty surprises, start to show up. To manage all this potential chaos, teams lean heavily on something called a defect tracking system. And look, it's way more than just a list of bugs. You should think of it as the central nervous system for the whole engineering team. It's the workflow that controls how every single problem gets handled, from a tiny typo to a catastrophic system crash. And inside that system, every team has to make this critical distinction between severity and priority. They sound similar, but they are not the same thing. Severity is all about the technical impact, like how badly does this bug break our code? But priority is about business urgency. How fast do we need to fix this to keep things moving? For example, you could have a super severe bug that completely crashes a feature. But if only 0.1% of your users ever see that feature, it might be a lower priority than a minor visual glitch that everyone sees on the home screen. But here's the thing. Managing a project isn't just about spotting broken code. Sometimes, the real danger is hiding somewhere else entirely. And I have a story that shows exactly why testing your data is just as important. So picture this. Your company just dropped millions of dollars on a huge marketing campaign. The first reports start rolling in, and the numbers are mind-blowing. User engagement is off the charts. The team is high-fiving, investors are over the moon, everything is perfect. But then, an engineer discovers a tiny error. Just a simple misconfiguration on a piece of hardware was causing the system to count every single thing a user did twice. Every click, every view, every action. Doubled. Those amazing numbers, they were a complete fantasy. The real engagement was only half of what everyone thought it was. Can you imagine being the CEO who has to make that call? Going back to those ecstatic investors and telling them, yeah, about those incredible results, they were an illusion. A simple data check could have prevented that entire nightmare. So how do you stop these kinds of surprises from sinking your project? Well, you don't just cross your fingers and hope for the best. You plan for the worst. And you do it with a simple but incredibly powerful tool. This is a risk tracking sheet. It's not complicated, but it forces the team to do something crucial. Identify potential problems, guess how likely they are to happen and how bad they'll be, and then, this is the most important part, come up with a real plan to deal with them before they become a crisis. It basically turns all that free-floating anxiety into a structured, prioritized action plan. All right, you made it. You survived the long slog. Now it's time for the end game. the whole focus of the project shifts now. You're not really building new stuff anymore. You're stabilizing, polishing, and coordinating with the rest of the company to get this thing out the door. And just to put this whole journey in perspective, take a look at a typical timeline. That initial blueprint phase, maybe 20% of the project. The final launch phase we're talking about now, even smaller, maybe 10%. The vast majority of the time and effort, a whopping 70%, is spent right there in that middle phase, the slog. Now, during this final push to the finish line, the human element becomes absolutely paramount. You're managing expectations, trying to keep team morale from tanking during the inevitable crunch time, and you're making really tough calls about which bugs have to get fixed and which ones, frankly, have to wait. It's high stress, and making sure nobody starts pointing fingers is key.
And your priorities for launch day are completely different depending on who your customer is. If you're selling a B2B product to other businesses, your launch is all about making sure your own sales and support teams are trained and ready to go. But if you're launching a B2C app to millions of consumers, your number one priority is purely technical. Can our servers actually handle the tsunami of traffic that's about to hit?
So, the product is launched. Success. Everyone takes a huge sigh of relief. But the job isn't done. Nope. In a lot of ways, it's really just getting started. See, after the launch, it's all about listening. You are glued to performance metrics, you're digging through customer support tickets looking for patterns, and you're watching how real people are actually using your product in the wild. And all of that data, every single learning, gets fed directly back into the start of the next development cycle. It's a loop that never really ends. So, if you take one thing away from all this, it should be this. Building software isn't some mystical art. It is a structured, disciplined journey. It's about making smart choices up front, surviving the long haul by actively managing risk, and understanding that the launch isn't the end. It's just the beginning of the next lap. Ultimately, this whole complex process is about people managing complexity. But with AI getting shockingly good at writing code all by itself, it raises this huge, fascinating question for the future. Could this entire human-led journey, from the blueprint to the bug fixing, one day be completely automated? Definitely something to think about. Thanks so much for watching.